my pleasure to be able to join with everyone at this meeting, even though not physically. And I have just been asked to share from my experience of working directly on the process that led to the adoption of the gender bills, up to the level of adoption of the gender bills, and then their failure at the point of their failure at the point of enactment, so that they did not become the law. And I will just share so that we can largely understand why we need the private sector support, the politics that underpins the whole process. My sisters who have spoken before me have laid the foundation for the why of the gender bills. Why do we need gender equality? And so I will not overflog those. But the fact remains that it cannot be overemphasized that the quality of governance and the quality of development, all-round development, is affected when we actually have the exclusion of women in government. And my sister, Mrs. Amina Obiakweba, has also spoken about the impact on business, the economy. So I will just give us a background to the gender bill. So sometime in 2020, early 2020, the National Assembly put out that it was going to be undertaking what we call the constitutional reform exercise. But along the line, COVID came and disrupted everything. Actually, the conversations had started from 2019, but COVID came and disrupted everything. The National Assembly, recognizing clearly that if they didn't start the process, they were not likely to, the Ninth Assembly, they were not likely to achieve what needed to be achieved. So immediately after there was some lifting of, what was it called in those days when we couldn't move around? With the process again was jump-started, and they started to constitute, technical consultants, committees, and everything. And the process came. Interestingly, gender equality was number one on the agenda. It was actually number one. And that for us was indicative at that time of a more serious commitment to gender equality. And this comes against the backdrop of the fact that for about through two different assemblies earlier, 7th, 8th, the gender equality and gender and equal opportunities bill, two bills had failed. So we actually thought that it was something that was signaling a serious commitment. But as you will see as I go through some of the processes, you will really see that there is a lot of politics that we need to respond to. And the politics is not inadvertent, and that is why we must be strategic in our response. So I want to talk about the politics of the gender bill so that we will see that the politics is not inadvertent. It just doesn't happen. It is conscious, it is deliberate, and there is no intention to give, and so we must be strategic in how we approach the issues. Let me say first of all that both the Senate and the House of Representatives had parallel processes, and in those parallel processes, the first starting point was the constitution of some technical committees, the committees of technical experts. The committee of the Senate had no female expert. It was made up of about 30-something experts, but it had no female expert. And the only female that came from the Legislative Assembly, the Senate, from the office of the Senate President, was a judge of Osun State, a former judge of Osun State, who literally, from her sharing with me, she was not officially listed. She more or less bulldozed her way into that committee. I got on the committee when the UN Women, realizing that there was no female on the technical experts committee, decided to approach the Senate President and request that I be allowed to join as a technical expert, and they would sponsor. I need to note that the technical experts were, the roles were paid for. They were like consultants to the Senate. A parallel situation also obtained even with the House of Reps. And my colleague, Professor Joy Ezilo, did not find her way onto that team until the end of about midway through 2021, towards the end of 2021. So it tells you that it's just not, when it comes to the scramble, gender is not reckoned with as a significant point of representation. Another thing I need to note about the politics of the gender bills and the whole process of that constitution review or constitution reform exercise is that even though gender equality was topmost on the list of areas to be considered, and we had the president make commitments to gender equality, and we had just come out of COVID, where the Governors Forum, and with some acknowledgement from other arms of government, had recognized the pandemic nature of violence, gender-based violence, and a national crisis had been declared around it. And the Senate President was expressly in favor of gender equality by some pronouncements and some actions taken. Along the line, the Speaker of the House of Representatives himself was a sponsor of one of the gender equality bills. And all of these persons were from the same party. All of these persons were in the party leadership. Somehow, the bills all failed woefully. And that tells you that truly it is a very serious problem that we are faced with, and we really need to be very strategic even the leadership of the party could not muster support for the gender bills at the various tiers of government. But I will come back to that. I also need to note that the whole process, they somehow made clear that in the night assembly, it looked like the Senate was more favorably disposed to the gender bills than even the House of Representatives, which I think strategically also says to us that we must disaggregate when we are dealing with the National Assembly. So what are they? Let me go quickly because I know that I have a very short time to speak. It's a very, very short meeting. Let me go straight to the gender bills. Which were the 5 gender bills? My understanding is that there is a publication on the political and economic analysis of the gender bills, which is produced by WATC, and this has been shared. I believe that they will be before you, and so I will just be speaking to the content of that publication and doing some analysis. The first one is the bill affirming equality in relation to citizenship by marriage. And I think this is very telling. I do not need to overflog it. Essentially, what Nigeria has is citizenship by birth, which means that if either of your parents are Nigerians, you are automatically a Nigerian, regardless of where you are born. There is also citizenship by naturalization, and then there is citizenship by registration. Now, registration is really where we have the problem. The wife of a foreigner who is a wife of a Nigerian a male automatically gets citizenship by registration. But there is no such provision for the husband of a Nigerian woman, regardless of how long the person may have resided. One of the things that came up, and that man has to go through naturalization. Now, one of the things that came up was the why of this, and it is all just about patriarchy. But what I remember I raised when we, both at the technical committee level and also when I had to present to the Senate, was that why is it that Nigerians, we love to take the best of some other systems that we seemingly copy? I had Dr. Abiola Akinode-Afolabi refer to that in her introductory speech. So we all have many Nigerians. We boast of Nigerians who go elsewhere and are able to acquire citizenship. We have Nigerians, we have our sons, our Nigerian young men marry other people and take up citizenship with ease there. We have, whether those ones are also Nigerians, maybe by birth, but have other citizenship. But when it comes to opening up our doors, then we suddenly become paranoid and we see how it is possible that others can take over. We see the security challenges, but we continue to celebrate Nigerians who are able to take up citizenship elsewhere and do excellently well. But when it comes to opening up for others, we really get very, very paranoid. So it is very telling that the National Assembly, and I dare say that if we did do a survey, a significant number of those National Assembly members may have sons who have dual citizenship by reason of marriage, and with citizenship that they have acquired by marriage. So that was one of the things that we put out. And I need to say that the bill did sail through in the Senate, but it failed in the House of Reps. And because we needed concurrence, it necessarily failed. Then we go also to indigenship, the right to choose your indigenship. Again, this was something that was really contentious. Initially, it was accepted. I think the risk actually to it for women came up because it was the larger concerns about other, it was more about the ethnic sentiments than it really was about gender. And I know that there were some attempts by some to modify and say, okay, let's make it specific. Let's make it specific for women. And that was the modification that came at the Senate and said that, look, okay, if we're not opening it all up to everybody, let's at least let women be able to choose their indigenship. And again, that was a bill. And that's, of course, because of the issues of marriage. So you find, and I think I actually heard Dr. Adibiola also refer to that, it is not unknown that women have lost opportunities as they have been tossed between states, whether it is their natal state, the state of origin by birth, or their state of origin by marriage. What is interesting is that in Nigeria, under our various various ethnically derived customary law, we actually do have different approaches, and that creates the contention. So I think that people in the Southwest and in the North are more open to women taking up citizenship by marriage, indigenship by marriage, and indigenship by birth, and retaining either, or even enjoying having that fluid arrangement. Now, fluidity was one thing that was of concern to some of the senators in the interactions that I had with them. And it was that, look, why do women want to have the best of two worlds? They want to retain citizenship by birth, and they also want the opportunity of indigenship by birth, indigenship by marriage. We move into, and the private sector may not feel that this is a huge problem because indigenship is not usually a critical thing when you are talking about opportunities in industry, opportunities in business, and in the private sector generally. But when it comes to politics and when it comes to governance, indigenship is a critical factor by reason of the federal character. And so when women are disadvantaged or advantaged along such lines, it becomes a huge challenge. I think you can just go to, I can see that you're trying to flag it. I think you can go to page 16. Emanuela, you can go to page 16. Thank you. Thank you. So again, the bill passed on indigenship, the right of women to choose their indigenship passed in it passed in the Senate, but again, it failed in the House of Reps. And that is why I said it is really important to identify that the National Assembly is not one whole, and it is strategically, it will always be important to identify where we have the most allies and where we need to concentrate a lot of work. It would appear that there was a lot more work done with the Senate, and because the Senate started out on its process a lot earlier than the House of Reps. The other bill that came up was the bill on specific seats across the federal and state assemblies, what we call reserved constituency. And what is interesting about that is that that bill actually did come. That bill actually was at the instance of the National Assembly itself. And it was at the instance of the House of Representatives. And it had a version. It had a version in the Senate, but it had a more comprehensive, a more robust version from the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives, essentially, it was about reserving a special seat in every constituency, whether senatorial or House of Representatives, adding on one special seat for women that only women will contest for. And that is a model that was picked up from what has happened in some other jurisdictions as a starting point. There were even proposals that we should make this time bound and that it is not something that should be like for always. Its two versions were presented with the hope that one of the two versions will be one of the considerations were against it, one of the arguments against it from the Senate in particular, where there was opposition against it, was that it was going to be too expensive and that we were going to be adding to the burden of governance. And all the arguments that was made about the cost of governance in the other spheres, and I think it's even come up more recently as they have bought vehicles, that the whole amount that was used for purchasing the vehicles would have been sufficient for those extra seats, that we were looking at. But the opposition was really great at the Senate, and it was like it couldn't pass at all. It was also, in fact, the Senate was much better than the House of Representatives. And so that was another bill that was there. Then there was the bill on special seats in the executive, in the party executive of the political parties, 35% representation. The argument being that if we are not in the party politics, then if we're not in the leadership, we are heavily represented in the membership. We are probably at par in the membership, but we're very low in the leadership. That we needed to do a lot, we needed to have representation, and that if the party started, to put their put their money where their mouth is, and they all speak gender equality, and they all speak about equal opportunities. If we had 35% representation in party politics, it is likely going to demystify, partisan politics, and encourage, the participation of women in political party activities. Again, at the Senate, we had a lot more support for that, and but again, it failed woefully. The version of it was affirmative action for women in political parties at the House of Representatives, and again, it failed woefully. Then we tried hands on the bill of 10% women's representation in the executive cabinet. And there were concerns about whether we needed to have this, because in some cases, we had actually exceeded the 10%. And the argument was that we had exceeded the 10% in many places, but we had not achieved the 10% in many places. And that what we wanted from the constitutional reform exercise was a statement of a minimum of 10%. 10% was not the ask, but 10% was what was negotiated up to some point. And we actually got overwhelming yes vote for that in the we got overwhelming yes vote for that in the House of Representatives, but again, it failed in the Senate, and so it did not. We couldn't get too far with it. So I think that it's important that we understand that there is a lot of politics, and that it is not something that is just incidental. It is really something that we need, the amount of work that needs to be done to penetrate. Now, in identifying what was some of the challenges as someone who was part of the process, and I will just invite that we speedily, for Emanuela, if you can just move the document quickly to, let's look at, just a minute, please. I thought I was going to be able to be with you, but unfortunately, recommendations that come out of challenges, and I'll take them simultaneously. One thing was sure, we were not, it looked like we didn't Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. We was clear that we didn't have enough awareness around the wider community of women's groups, and that is why we're here today. We needed to have other. Of course, we the social and political activists were very, very involved, and there was some move to widen the net, but it didn't really start from the very beginning of the process. And that is why we're starting early. We want to get the feedback on some of these bills, even from some of our sisters, from the private sector representatives that are here today. We want to see if we can, if these are bills that you would align with, why you would and why you would not, and what you think we need to be doing, so that we own these bills together from the very, very beginning. Of course, we need a lot more strategic and aggressive. I use the word aggressive, not in the violent way, but there's got to be a little bit more. You can have strategic, but it has to be a little bit more assertive, more frontal. To popularize the agenda. What I found that was really interesting was that when the public hearing on the bills held in Lagos, and I attended, I met a colleague who was representing the Nigerian Society of Engineers at the public hearing. And it was interesting to find that one of their submissions actually was in support of the gender equality. The bills were not yet completely ironed out at that time, but they had made representation on the issue of gender equality in politics as against others, alongside other sectors. And I found that quite impressive, because I remember asking him what he was doing there and when he made his submission and it reflected gender, I thought that was really commendable. So I think